Could an unprecedented third term for Xi Jinping lead to a ruler for life? With fewer factions and dissent disappearing, will Xi go completely unchallenged within the Communist Party? And what will his reaffirmed authority mean for China, Taiwan, and the world? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Xi Jinping. Held every 5 years, China's Communist Party Congress is a carefully choreographed, somewhat tedious event, at least when the cameras are on. Unusually, though, over the course of its 20th session in Beijing last week, several dramatic moments caught the world's eye, not least when a seemingly confused former president, Hu Jintao, was suddenly escorted out of the Great Hall of the People. It all culminated with Xi accepting an extraordinary third term as president and appointing a fully loyalist Politburo Standing Committee. With more on the CCP Congress and the men behind Xi Jinping now, here's Ahad Al-Fadli.
On the conclusion of the Chinese Communist Party Congress, Xi Jinping received a standing ovation after securing an unprecedented third time as president.
Thanks to the concerted efforts of the entire party and the Chinese people of all ethnic groups, China has fully established a moderately prosperous society according to plan, thus completing the first centenary goal. Now we're taking confident strides on a new journey to turn China into a modern socialist country in all respects, to advance toward the second centenary goal, and to embrace the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation on all fronts through Chinese path to modernization.
Even though all eyes were on Xi Jinping, his predecessor briefly stole the spotlight. In an unusual moment during the highly choreographed closing ceremony, China's former president, Hu Jintao, was escorted off the stage. It's not clear why, but he appeared to resist leaving as he was led out. But the Congress was primarily about restructuring the party's inner power circle. Xi introduced a new Politburo Standing Committee packed with loyalists, further solidifying his place as the country's most powerful ruler since Mao Zedong. So who are the men who will rule China for the next 5 years under Xi? Li Qiang is the former Shanghai party chief and now is the number 2 in the party hierarchy. He's on track to be named premier in March. In recent months, Li has been blamed for the harsh and unpopular 2-month COVID-19 lockdown in Shanghai under China's zero-COVID policy. Zhao Liji has been promoted to number 3. He's the former head of the party's top anti-corruption body. Number 4 in the party lineup is Wang Huning, the Communist Party's principal theorist who helped shape the official party ideology under 3 presidents and is the architect of Xi's Chinese Dream slogan. Number 5 is Chai Chi, a newcomer to the Politburo Standing Committee. He's been the party chief of Beijing since 2017 and oversaw the Beijing Winter Olympics in February. Number 6 is Ding Shui Xiyang, chief of staff and another newcomer to the Politburo. He's a close aide to Xi and almost always travels with him. And number 7 is Li Qi, who's set to lead the party's agency for investigating corrupt or disloyal officials. Ahad Fadli, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss the implications of Xi's third term and the events of last week are from Beijing, Qinduo, a political analyst who was formerly China Radio International's chief correspondent in Washington. In Tokyo, we have Lim Tai Wei, a research fellow at the National University of Singapore's East Asian Institute and the author of China's One Belt, One Road initiative. And from the UK, Colin Alexander, he's a senior lecturer in political communications at Nottingham Trent University. He's also the author of China and Taiwan in Central America, Engaging Foreign Publics in Diplomacy. Thanks all so much for being with us. Hu Jintao, I'll start with you because you are, of course, in Beijing, and ask what you make of especially the global attention this Congress has received. Is it merited? Was this meeting truly different and more dramatic than others before it?
Well, I think the tension from overseas mostly is about the personnel reshuffle. Now you have a new leadership, basically a brand new leadership, many new faces, fresh faces into this standing committee of the Central Committee. Basically, that is the highest decision-making body of the party and, in a sense, the country. So people are paying attention to that, but I think there is probably too much attention on the personnel changes. I would say the real value is in the report delivered by Mr. Xi Jinping. That's really about the blueprint, what kind of goals China is pursuing and what are the means and ways for China to achieve those kind of goals. That matters to China and also matters to the rest of the world.
So you think, in a way, the international media has been reading too much into this Congress? Because there's always some kind of personnel reshuffle announced. But this time, it seemed much more, I'll use the word again, dramatic than conferences before.
That's true. That is true. It's a bit more dramatic because people say, "Oh, it's it's breaking rules." Like for the past, like as President Xi Jinping was reelected for the third term as the party secretary, the general secretary of the CPC. So people are saying that he's going to have the third term. That's a change. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, there's a lot of talk about that. But I think really it's about the path to the future. For example, in 2035 or in the middle of this century, what kind of goals China is going to pursue and what kind of country China is to become. Obviously, it is very different from a Western style nation, let's say, but China is trying to modernize this country in the Chinese way. So there's new terms, for example, the Chinese style modernization or high quality development, in the innovation driven economic growth, for example. I think that kind of terms, that kind of development goals, matter a lot for China and the world.
Okay. So Lim Tai Wei, observing from where you are, during this Congress, President Xi was actually elevated to the people's leader. And one of the more kind of dramatic outcomes here. It's a title only given before to Mao Zedong. So do you see this conference as unique? And how much does that title alone say how President Xi sees himself and what he needs to achieve?
Well, the conference is definitely unique because there have been a lot of precedents that have been sort of revised. So, for example, the age limit has been revised. And also the Politburo, there's a reduction by one member. And also there has been, promotion of leaders across generations that were rather unexpected by observers. So in many ways, the Congress did sort of overturn conventions from the past. And therefore, many analysts do consider it to be unprecedented. As well as for the title, indeed, it is another feature that is unprecedented because the title has only been used by the founding father of the People's Republic and momentarily used by his successor, very momentarily. So, in fact, this would be the third time that it is applied on a top leader, elevating him from core to people's leader. And this shows a great centralization of power within his person, within his person, within his office, and also within his faction.
Okay. Let me talk to Colin, similar lines here, because we're hearing these comparisons between Xi Jinping and now Mao Zedong. And some are saying that he actually wants to eclipse Mao as the definitive leader of modern China. What do you think?
I think that he is, that's certainly the intention that he has, and that he wants to, I don't know, let's call it cement a particularly strong legacy in delivering China to its sort of, I guess, like a fully sort of superpower status. But I think, there's perhaps an elephant in the room here in the previous two responses, in that we haven't talked about Hu Jintao and how he was removed from the auditorium, seemingly against his will, and that really is indicative of the Xi kind of moving towards elevated status in comparison to the previous leaders of China, or the ones that have occurred between Mao and himself, and also saying, "I am different," and he is really sort of casting his authority over the situation.
Qinduo, I'll get your comments in just a second, specifically about Hu Jintao. But Colin, I mean, do you believe he wants to be, ruler for life, and that some say that's why he deliberately kind of avoided an identifying a successor over the last week?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think more broadly, we have seen a bit of a trend in this in the last perhaps decade or so. Putin in Russia has removed the sort of term limitations. And even smaller countries like Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega has done similar. So this is a bit of a trend at the moment in terms of people rewriting constitutions, or perhaps watering down constitutions in some form or another. Ultimately, only Xi Jinping himself knows really what he wants to do. I would also say that there's a danger in doing this, though. If you go to somewhere like Uzbekistan, where when Usman Karimov died in office after sort of being a kind of life president, they were really stuck for what to do afterwards. So actually having a plan and making sure that one does not overstay one's welcome, perhaps into more senile years, is important as well.
Okay. Qinduo, I want to get your opinion first on, much was made, as you know. That's why I asked first about international press coverage, because a lot was seen in what happened in the exchange between Xi Jinping and Hu Jintao, and how Xi Jinping really avoided making even eye contact when the man right next to him was being unceremoniously taken out of the Great Hall of the People. What happened? What do you know from China that apparently the rest of the world is still asking about?
Well, Andrea, I would say nobody knew for 100% sure what happened at that moment. I can tell you, I was there. I was watching, Mr. Hu's departure from the seat. And I can also tell you that Mr. Hu, at the age of 80, has a poor health. And the understanding is to sit there for the procedures for the next 3 or 4 items, basically voting procedures, would be challenging probably for him. And I can also tell you that Mr. Xi has huge respect for Mr. Hu. For one thing, for example, when Hu Jintao retired, he basically left all the title to Xi Jinping.
Okay.
And that helped President Xi to basically establish himself very soon in terms of taking control of the government and the country.
Then
so anyone, have read too much. That's a problem with China watchers,
Okay, but tell me this then: if Xi Jinping has great respect, as you say, for Hu Jintao, why was this done in front of the cameras? Why was he allowed to be humiliated? It looked humiliating. Whether you want to admit that or not, I think you know, it didn't look good, and it made Hu Jintao look weak and sad. Why would he do that to a man he respects?
No, we don't know exactly that Mr. Xi with that kind of eye contact or whatever, because remember, in front of
saw
them,
it on
there
the
are
cameras,
3,000 delegates from the nation, different corners of the nation, watching that. I don't think there's any, ill intention from that. It's simply probably, probably someone is asking whether you are tired, you can leave. As a procedure, you can also come back to vote for the final vote for the central member of the central committee. That's more important than the procedures. And Hu Jintao did come back for that vote. So I think people read too much into a particular gesture or departure of the former president, and then people draw conclusions. That's a problem of the misreading of the Chinese politics of many China watchers in the West in particular.
Colin, I can see you disagree there, but yeah, go ahead quickly if you had a response.
This was a highly choreographed move by the Chinese, and as you point out yourself, that he clearly didn't want to go. He was clearly surprised that he was going. And as I say, this is political choreography, of which this Congress was a highly choreographed event. So it's not like it's just a sort of done on a whim or anything like that.
Which is strange that we, even from, from Qinduo himself, that we can't understand why it was done and why exactly it wasn't explained to the Chinese people that this happened. But let's move on, because we need to talk a little more about the future here. And Lim Tai Wei, I'll get your opinion as well on where you think Xi Jinping is going, as far as, does he want to be a leader for life, and would that be good for the Chinese people? We see some apparent support for that now, or at least little concern, but would that be what the nation needs going forward?
It is clear that the nation is moving forward in the direction of centralization of power. It is also clear that there is a continuity of a strongman regime. In fact, on the first day, when President Xi made his speech, most commentators noted continuity in policies. That they did not spot a very severe discontinuity. So we are likely to see more of the same coming from the policies, and that would be emphasis on social stability. It will be emphasis on high-tech industry 4.0, 5.0 developments. There will also be a strong direction and drift towards a military buildup to become a strong security state. There will also be a lot of emphasis on what the party terms as a equalization of wealth factor through instruments like common prosperity. So all these are really a continuity of the same, but perhaps it will be supercharged since the team under him is filled with loyalists, and some have come up with the nickname Maximum Xi to describe the new team.
Okay.
As for the future about his tenure, it remains to be seen. People are already looking at the 21st Party Congress for more clues, because currently most of the leaders that were promoted were 60 over years old, and they will be looking out for younger leaders that will be promoted in the course of the next Party Congress.
Okay. Colin, let me come back to you quickly, because I want to ask you as well about the people now around Xi Jinping and the Standing Committee, and whom he did not include in this. I mean, several of the economic leaders that some had expected, including Vice Premier Liu He and the central bank governor, were not included. Why do you think that was?
Well, yes, exactly. And we should also note that there were no females included as well. And we live in relatively progressive times, so we would think that at least one female could emerge as a candidate. I think this is clearly about Xi rewarding loyalty to himself and not necessarily promoting based on meritocracy, let's say, or in terms of ability to, or indeed track record of performance in previous roles. So I think that it's kind of as simple as that. But again, that we've just seen this in the UK with a similar sort of problem with the Liz Truss's government, where she ultimately put in place people who were loyal to her, but actually any political party, whether it's the CCP or the Conservative Party in the UK, is a broad church of opinions. And one of the jobs of leadership is to be conciliatory towards opinions and to ensure that, as much as possible, different factions within the party are represented. This kind of shows that she doesn't really care about that all that much anymore, and that it's more evidence of his solidifying of his strength.
Qinduo, go ahead. And I mean, do you have anything to say about what seems so clear, at least from the outside, that President Xi really doesn't want any factionalization, any dissent whatsoever? Is that...
No.
No? Go ahead.
That the thing is like, there are analysis saying that, oh, the youth league camp now is out, or, whatever camp, Shanghai camp is in. No, there's no such a thing. This kind of analysis is so outdated. They are all the Communist Party members. They are all loyal to the Chinese Communist Party. We should always keep that in mind. They are serving the party. They are serving the country. And of course, I understand if President Xi would hire people, that's people who worked with him or he's familiar with. He knows them very well. He has high confidence. I mean, that's just a natural development. For example, when Biden came to power, of course, he will use someone from the Democratic Party, rarely from the Republican Party. So that's just natural.
Okay.
If
But
people
what
say,
about-
oh, they are loyalists, that they are not capable, that's simply wrong.
Were no women loyal enough to be in the?
Well, as far as I can remember, I'm sorry to say that I would love to see a woman inside this 7-member standing committee. But I think since the founding of the People's Republic, I don't remember any women candidate or women member in this standing committee, unfortunately. Of course, I would love to see China, to say fight for more, or to develop more in terms of equality between the genders.
Okay. Qinduo, let me ask you this, though, because, I mean, when I talked about who wasn't included in the standing committee, it's led some to ask how much President Xi really cares about China remaining and being a global economic power, because some say he would rather actually just be looking inward to make China more self-sufficient, rather than looking for, appointing again the central bank governor or the economic czar among the inner circle in order to get the economy as an ultimate priority in keeping China a global economic power. That's not where he's at. What do you say?
As I said, that if people follow China closely, they should read the report carefully. And that's what China wants to become. You would find out the secret of what kind of country the CPC wants China to become, and what are their goals and how they are going to reach there, for example. I agree with Mr. Lin. Actually, there's a strong continuity in terms of the Chinese development. So high quality development, again, is being seen as the foremost and the highest priority for China to become a socialist modern country. So development again, and then you talked about self-reliance of technology. When the U.S. imposed a sweeping ban on export of semiconductor products, what else you can do instead of in addition to relying on yourself? You have to rely on yourself. China is a big country. I would say China. The population is even larger than the OECD country combined. So yes, and to a large extent, yeah.
Yeah, Lim Tai Wei, though, with national security as a huge priority as well. I mean, should democracy activists in Taiwan be very worried right now?
Well, this is a very sensitive question because on the first day, when President Xi made the speech, he did mention that China will not renounce the possible use of force if necessary. But at the same time, he also mentioned that the Chinese government would try to exhaust all peaceful methods possible. And on the first day as well, it drew reaction from across the straits. And basically, the same message was there across the straits, that they still hope that there will be a peace, and they would not provoke an incident that would lead to warfare. So I think for many in the East Asian region, especially ASEAN and other neighbors of China, and also the stakeholders in regional peace, they hope that the peaceful conflicts can be sort of resolved. But as the problem is so sensitive and deep-seated, it may be not possible to resolve it quickly or within a short time. And therefore, most neighboring and regional countries hope that at least the temperature can be tuned down with the new team in place. If not tuned down, at least to avoid accidents from happening and breaking out. And prevention of accidents through hotlines and other means is probably a priority that regional countries hope that these countries can install.
But Colin Alexander, that may be what regional countries hope, but do you think that is what they will get, especially when it comes to China and Taiwan?
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with the previous interviewee on that one. The Taiwan speech, or the element of Xi's speech, which talked about Taiwan, was really interesting. On the one hand, it's kind of a business as usual in terms of the position of the CCP towards Taiwan. But on the other hand, he was quite conciliatory towards the Taiwanese people in saying that any escalation of military procedure around Taiwan was ultimately in response to external influence, which he's really sort of talking about the United States in this one. And what he's trying to say is that ultimately the Taiwanese have nothing to fear from China themselves. And of course, that's a pretty valid argument to make, given if you want to reconcile this concept of Greater China.
Okay.
But at the same time, the Taiwanese people are looking to Hong Kong and saying, well, there are still certainly questions to ask on that one.
Okay, Colin Alexander, that will have to be the final word. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists sincerely so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.